In the vast expanse of the galaxy, civilizations had long since surpassed the need for sentimentality. For countless millennia, the galactic concord reigned, a coalition of advanced species that saw the universe through the lens of logic and utility. Starships were nothing more than tools, defined by their functions and stripped of anything resembling personality. They were labeled with cold, mechanical efficiency: Survey Craft 743, Battlecruiser Alpha 9. Numbers and designations were enough for the Concorde. Names, they argued, were distractions, remnants of a primitive way of thinking. Then came humanity, a species so young it was barely a whisper in galactic history. Their entry into the Concorde was met with mild curiosity and subtle disdain. The other species marveled at humanity's adaptability, yet they scoffed at their peculiar traditions. Chief among these oddities was humanity's insistence on naming their starships. To the Zenari, masters of logic, this was an inefficiency. To the Kratax, a martial species that valued hierarchy and order, it was a frivolity. During a Concorde assembly, a Kratax admiral openly voiced what many others silently thought. You name your ships as though they are living things. Tell me, what does naming a hunk of metal accomplish in battle? Will your Endeavor fight harder than my warship Beta 12 because it has a name? The room erupted in subdued murmurs, many sharing the sentiment. The human ambassador, a seasoned diplomat named Lila Harris, replied calmly. Names are more than adornments, Admiral. They're stories, legacies, reminders of why we fight and explore. You see a hunk of metal. We see resilience, courage, and hope. Names inspire us to be more than we are. The Kratax sneered but said nothing further. The moment passed, and the assembly moved on to matters of greater urgency, a crisis brewing on the galactic rim. A new enemy, one unlike anything the Concorde had faced, was advancing. The void ships, as they came to be called, were biomechanical monstrosities, absorbing everything in their path. Entire systems fell silent as they consumed resources, life, and even light itself. The Concorde, unaccustomed to unified action, debated endlessly on how to respond. Every species guarded its fleets, unwilling to risk their resources without guarantees of success. Humanity, however, saw the threat for what it was: an existential danger to all life. We'll send our fleet, Ambassador Harris announced, her voice cutting through the squabbling. Humanity will hold the line. The declaration was met with disbelief. Humanity's fleet was powerful but small compared to the armadas of older civilizations. Still, the humans spoke with conviction. Their flagship, Resilience, would lead the charge. Other ships, Endurance, Sacrifice, and Hope, would follow. The Kratax admiral couldn't resist one last jab. You'll die bravely, no doubt, but I'll remember your names as little more than tombstones. Lila Harris only smiled. We'll see if names matter when the galaxy learns to fight for something more than survival. As the human fleet prepared to depart, whispers spread throughout the Concorde. Perhaps there was something to these names after all. Perhaps they held a power the galaxy had yet to understand. In the quiet moments before the fleet departed, Commander Elena Torres stood on the bridge of Resilience, gazing out at the distant stars. She had grown up with stories of Earth's great explorers, dreamers, and fighters. Her ancestors had sailed oceans in wooden ships bearing names like Endurance and Discovery. It wasn't just tradition, it was belief. Belief that a name carried the weight of a purpose, a legacy that could inspire people to reach beyond their limits. The Concorde's disdain for humanity's practice was no secret. Torres had endured her share of patronizing remarks during interspecies briefings. To them, names were frivolous, sentimental trappings. But to her, they were essential. A name wasn't just a label, it was a declaration of intent, a promise to the universe. Torres remembered the story of Freedom's Flame, humanity's first successful colony ship to escape Earth's dying atmosphere centuries ago. The vessel had been a last hope for survival, built from the scraps of a collapsing civilization. Its mission was desperate, its odds slim, yet it had persevered. The name wasn't just symbolic, it had become a rallying cry for its passengers. When systems failed, when resources dwindled, the crew whispered its name like a prayer. Freedom's flame didn't just carry people. It carried their hopes, their will to live. And now, aboard Resilience, Torres felt the same weight. This ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol. Its name reminded her crew of what they were fighting for, not just survival, but the determination to endure and triumph. She couldn't imagine commanding a ship called Fleet Unit 3 or Battlecruiser Delta. Those were empty designations, devoid of meaning. Her thoughts shifted to the crew around her. Humans were emotional creatures, and that was often seen as a weakness. But Torres believed it was their greatest strength. Their ability to feel, to be moved by something greater than themselves, was what pushed them to achieve the impossible. When fear and doubt crept into their minds, a name could ground them, remind them of the ideals they represented. Why do we name them? Torres had once asked her mentor during her academy days. The answer had stayed with her ever since. Because one day, when everything feels lost, a name will remind you what you're fighting for. It'll give you the strength to keep going. The Concorde didn't understand this. The Zenari, with their cold logic, couldn't fathom fighting for anything beyond strategic objectives. The Kratax, with their rigid hierarchy, saw only the efficiency of command and obedience. But humanity saw something more. To them, ships weren't just tools. They were extensions of their dreams, their fears, and their resolve. As the crew of Resilience prepared for battle, Torres addressed them over the comms. "This isn't just a ship," she said. "This is our promise to each other, to Earth, and to everyone out there who still believes in hope. Whatever happens, remember her name. Remember why we're here." Her voice carried through the ship, steady and resolute. Every member of the crew felt it, a spark of determination igniting in their hearts. In that moment, Resilience wasn't just metal and machinery. It was alive with purpose, a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit. The void ships loomed ahead, an unstoppable force of destruction. Yet as Torres looked around, she saw no fear in her crew's eyes. They had resilience. And that, she knew, would make all the difference. The void ships arrived like a tidal wave, black and pulsating, their biomechanical hulls absorbing light itself. They moved with an eerie precision, as though they were a single living organism bent on devouring everything in its path. The fleets of the Concorde, vast and technologically advanced, had assembled to meet this threat. Yet, as the enemy drew closer, hesitation rippled through their lines. The Concorde ships were disciplined, perfectly aligned by rank and purpose, yet devoid of spirit. Their crews executed maneuvers flawlessly but without unity of thought or emotion. Fear began to creep in as the void ships unleashed waves of psychic attacks, an invisible force that sowed despair, confusion, and terror among the ranks. One by one, ships faltered, breaking formation or retreating outright. The human fleet, led by Resilience, held its position. Commander Torres stood tall on the bridge, her voice steady as she relayed orders. "We hold the line," she said. "No matter what comes, we do not break." Her words carried through the comm channels, calm yet firm, a lifeline in the chaos. As the first wave of void ships closed in, Resilience and her sister ships opened fire. Beams of energy and missile salvos streaked across the void, striking the enemy with pinpoint accuracy. The void ships countered with devastating force, adapting to each attack with terrifying speed. The Concorde fleets, despite their superior numbers, struggled to maintain cohesion. On the human ships, it was a different story. Every crew member knew their ship's name, and every name carried meaning. When Endurance was struck by a brutal assault, her crew rallied around the ship's namesake. "Endurance doesn't fall," the captain declared, and the crew fought to stabilize the vessel against all odds. Sacrifice lived up to her name when a void ship threatened to breach the human formation. Without hesitation, her captain ordered a collision course, detonating the ship's reactor at point-blank range. The explosion shattered the void ship and bought precious time for the fleet to regroup. Even as Sacrifice was lost, her name echoed in the comms, a cry of defiance that inspired the remaining ships to fight harder. The turning point came when Resilience herself was targeted by a swarm of void ships. Hull integrity dropped rapidly, alarms blaring throughout the vessel. Yet Torres remained unshaken. "This ship is called Resilience for a reason," she said, her voice steady. "We don't give in. We don't give up." Her crew responded with unwavering resolve, working as one to keep the ship in the fight. Seeing humanity's determination, some Concorde crews began to rally. For the first time, they called out the names of the human ships, using them as rallying points. Hold the line with Resilience. Cover hope. Honor sacrifice. The names became more than words. They became symbols of courage and defiance in the face of annihilation. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The void ships, though relentless, could not overcome the coordinated resistance of the human-led forces. The battle raged for hours, each moment a test of endurance and will. When the last void ship fell, the battlefield was a graveyard of wreckage and fire. Humanity's fleet was battered, their losses heavy, but they had held the line. The Concorde fleets, though initially scattered, had been inspired to regroup. They had witnessed something they could not fully understand: how a name could turn fear into strength, chaos into unity. As the human fleet limped back to friendly space, the galaxy had learned something new about the power of belief, of purpose, and of resilience. The battlefield lay in silence, a scar across the void of space. Wreckage drifted aimlessly, and a faint glow of dying stars illuminated the remnants of the fleet. Humanity had held the line, but at a terrible cost. Sacrifice was gone, along with endurance and valiant. Other ships, barely operational, limped toward safety. Yet among the survivors, there was no despair, only a quiet, resolute pride. For the Concorde, the aftermath was sobering. Their fleet had been shattered, their unity exposed as a facade of convenience rather than true cohesion. Despite their technological superiority, it was humanity's resolve that had turned the tide. The names of human ships were now etched in their memories, symbols of a courage they had never understood. In the days following the battle, the Concorde convened in a somber assembly. The Cratax admiral, who had once mocked the practice of naming ships, spoke first. His tone was gruff but carried a note of reluctant respect. "I have seen ships named after numbers fail to inspire. I have seen warriors falter without meaning. Yet your resilience, your sacrifice, they carried your people through the impossible. Perhaps there is more to these names than I understood." The Zenari, typically cold and analytical, offered a rare concession. "We once believed that logic alone could sustain us, that emotion was a weakness. But the human fleet demonstrated something we could not quantify. A name. It is more than a designation. It is a beacon. A rallying point. An anchor against despair." Among the human delegation, there was no triumphalism, no celebration. Commander Torres, weary yet unbroken, addressed the assembly with a quiet strength. "Our ships have names because we need them to mean something. They remind us of our history, our struggles, and our hopes. Resilience wasn't just a ship, it was the embodiment of every person aboard who refused to give up, even when the odds were against us." The room fell silent as she continued. "You see these names as sentimentality, but they are so much more. They are legacies. And legacies endure." Her words lingered in the minds of the Concorde leaders. For the first time, they began to question the rigidity of their traditions. The Cratax admiral, though reluctant, proposed an unprecedented motion, that the names of humanity's ships be inscribed in the Concorde's Hall of Remembrance. "Let them stand as a reminder," he said, "of what we owe to those who fought not just with weapons, but with purpose." The motion passed unanimously. Back aboard Resilience, Torres sat in her captain's chair, gazing out at the stars. The ship was battered, her hull scarred and systems failing, but she had survived. To Torres, Resilience was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of everything humanity stood for. She thought of the other ships, those that hadn't returned. Their names echoed in her mind: sacrifice, endurance, hope. They were gone, but their legacies would live on. They had inspired not just humanity, but an entire galaxy. As the fleet made its way back to friendly space, Torres allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The galaxy had changed that day. Humanity, once seen as a young and insignificant species, had shown the Concord a truth they had long forgotten, that survival was not enough. To truly live, one must fight for something greater. In the days that followed, whispers spread throughout the Concord. Some species began to name their ships, hesitant at first but increasingly inspired by the power of the practice. Others adopted humanity's tradition of honoring the fallen, inscribing their names into the annals of their histories. And though the void threat was gone, the lessons of that battle remained. Humanity had proven that strength was not just in numbers or technology but in belief, in the power of a name, a purpose, a dream. For the galaxy, this was a revelation. For humanity, it was simply who they had always been.